How is everybody today? 5 odd hours of Chris Watts talking. I had to try and digest a bit because now I feel even more depressed than I was before about this whole situation. Well, I can imagine actually rather how everybody feels about watching that interview. It's just, does it ring right with you? Did it feel good? Did it feel like you were actually getting a proper explanation from the man? No, it didn't. It just felt like he was lying still, absolute lies. And he didn't have any respect for his wife, his children, or his family-in-law. That's what I saw. I just think he's a fantasist, an absolute fantasist who's lost in himself, and maybe because he's still having a lot of attention, he gets letters, he knows the news is talking about him, he's loving it, instead of telling the truth. This whole thing, I've never got into a case like this before in my life. I still just can't get over. How many of you watched or listened to prison interviews before? The ones when they're going, but you know, they actually tell you this person went missing and then these were the suspects and then these people were interviewed and then they found out it was them. How many of you have watched court cases, you know, especially in America more than the UK because they film a lot of them? So how many have watched those? How serious everything is. What was it like at the sentencing? So serious. And although I know that this wasn't about arresting him and all that kind of stuff, I've never heard a more bizarre interview in my life. I don't understand why they don't look into that dry footage more, because Nate says on national television it's come after he's been convicted that all he caught was him backing up onto the drive. The district attorney says everybody saw it, and the discovery document page 488 says it didn't, it turned off. Nate's turned off. We weren't talking about Chris Watts' camera, we're talking about Nate's one. So well, that's really strange to me, you know, after just looking at it. But anyway, back to this. We understand that Chris Watts has got much more into his Bible. Well, isn't in the Bible one of the things? You don't commit sins. Don't do these things. And I just find it absolutely incredible after these police officers just come round for a social with him that he says this stuff when he painted Shanann in such a bad light, so much so his parents believed him and were fighting to get him out because they didn't feel he was guilty for what he was being charged for. And after being convicted, months later, when his dad, or he speaks to his dad every day, he has not told his parents the truth about what he did. Look at his mother, absolutely distraught. We could all see how upset Shanann's parents were. You're looking at grief here. Look what he put his parents through. Him. Look how he's leaving everybody else. This poor Shanann's family. And we'd waited all that time for this.
Without computers.
Yeah. Exactly.
So these are people who still love him, still care about him, and still, whatever it is, communicate with him, go and see him. Didn't one of those police officers speak to his dad when Chris Watts had gone for lunch, and his dad was moving some of his stuff out of that house for him? Tried to protect him, doing it openly in court, on the television. I really, really hope that they now try and talk to Shanann's parents, as they now will know. At least he's admitted to killing all 3 of them. Anyway, so he's into this Bible book, you know, with whatever, and he doesn't tell his parents the truth. So until that day in February, he had not told his parents the truth. And yet he's into this Bible with all this big awakening, being able to recite, you know, chapters or verses or whatever it is. So my big feeling is that he just did the same thing as he did all through the welfare check. talking on his front doorstep to the news reporters, and when he was being questioned, with the polygraph with Tammy and Graham before. He just did the same thing that day. He told some of the truth and he kept on lying as well. So he hasn't really found anything, because if he did, he'd be honest to his mum and dad. And now they're telling them it was probably all rushed and had to be done a certain way, because obviously they've released what happened in that interview. He was so abstract and so detached, really, that I don't think he's come to terms with what he's done at all. Not at all. Yeah, they should have made him see the photographs of his children after they came out of those oil tanks. Everybody else had to clear up his mess. And apart from that, they were his beautiful daughters. He was supposed to love them. So he's so detached. If you didn't know any better and you'd just taken out the fact of how he killed them all, and then you took that out and put that together and played it to someone, they'd have said, oh, it's a nice social around someone's house, or want to hang out or something like that. Social. This man took 4 lives away and he didn't really say sorry. When he gets upset, it's because he's thinking of himself, and when he reads the Bible, he's interpreting it for himself, to himself. He's already flawed, broken, and done the most heinous thing ever to a pregnant woman and his children. I just, before I was actually playing this, was listening to the fact that he thoughts. I mean, that is just ridiculous, though. At that point, really, he should have realised that there was something wrong in his head. What person thinks that it's right, that the only way out of the situation that they've created is to want to kill them? I mean, it doesn't compute to me. I mean, I myself am divorced. I didn't think, hey, to get out of this marriage, I must kill my husband and children. We'll never really know what quite happened at that moment for him to do what he did. I can imagine that Shanann was so hurt if he's telling the truth about that conversation. But what man would do that? What person thinks that? Like, he hasn't even computed in his head. Normal people don't go around thinking of murdering their family just to get out to carry on having whatever with someone else. He hasn't even computed that bit to himself. He's all a victim of his circumstances. He caused all of this. All of it is his fault. He's the one that cheated. He was the one that was betraying. He was the one that was lying. He'd been lying to his wife for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. Lied on the front of his house, lied in the police station, and he's lying on that interview. He's lying. He still thinks he can get away with what he can get away with. He's so detached. When they were talking, anybody would think that Shanann was just round the corner. And in one sense, I could hear him not happy with her. And in another sense, he's saying, I wish I'd never looked. I wish I'd never gone into the office. I wish it never happened. Reminiscing over recipes that Shanann cooked. It was all just so surreal and bizarre. Although it was love, I feel it was love with this other woman, but I wish it had never happened. And then it's all like, he hadn't even gotten over in his head that obviously, he said, I tried to call her, but her attorney said not to ring. Would you want to speak to him? He hadn't even got that bit. He's just gone and murdered everybody. Yes, I'm sure she wants to talk to him. It's unbelievable. See, he hadn't even thought about that. Everything's happening to me. All these bad things happening, his mother, the other things. He's so... I'd say that's what he is inside. A little child caught somewhere in some traumatic experience that he's never really left, because that's where he was in his mind. So detached, and he's lying. He's still lying. He has no respect whatsoever, and he doesn't see anybody but himself. And whereas I understand those police officers had to butter him up because he's a narcissist who likes his ego being stroked, I still thought that was horrible. It was one of the worst interviews I've ever watched. All that stuff about their sex life and Shanann and all that. How could they do that? How could those police officers do that? It was actually that. Really? Was that? Wow. I don't believe he's sitting on top of her like that for 20 minutes. That's a lie. You're actually going to tell your wife that you want a divorce, so you sit on top of her straddled while she's pregnant for 20 minutes, trying to tell her how incompatible you are and all that. I'm not surprised she got really upset and said you're not seeing the children. Wouldn't you? You've got this man who had sex with you, and then he turns around and says you're not compatible. He cheated on his wife, and then if you wanted to say that he was in love with Nicole, he cheated on her back with Shanann. That man is he's just absolutely obsessed with himself. Maybe I should put bits of the video of him talking, but after listening to him for hours on end, I don't know if I can. I think the whole of the internet is totally depressed now about what's happened here, and the fact that although still more was given, there was still such a sort of grey area. I know that maybe do we need to hear it, but because this case is so big and so much is said and done, people do want to know. And he didn't really say sorry. He's a liar, and he'll always be a liar. Yeah, they're going back in 6 months because I think they're hoping eventually he will tell the complete truth, because he didn't the other day. He didn't. I think they know he didn't. I wish they wouldn't, you know. I don't know. I don't want to treat people cruelly. You know, and I suppose everything else is out of his control, and he's in there and he's just got to get on with it. Well, I don't know how he lives with himself. I know that appearances sometimes can be deceptive, but when you look at these few pictures, does he look like he's being dragged there against his will? Whether she was totally happy or not all the time, Shanann is always smiling. Her children are always smiling. Yes, in these pictures he's smiling, but he doesn't smile very much, not really. But in these pictures, does he look like he's being dragged there against his will? With a nagging wife? She may have been a little bit bossy, but most mothers get a little bit bossy when they've got lots of children to look after and stuff and work. Does he look like he's unhappy and dragged through everything? He is such a liar. Yeah, definitely. I kept saying that he was possessed. He's definitely possessed. But it's a bit of a shame he hadn't worked out who he was and his feelings, because when he did let them out, look what he did.